Toronto had waited a long time for a night like this. Under the open Toronto sky, beneath BMO Field's partial canopy roof, two footballing nations with a shared history of heartbreak and brilliance walked out to decide who would live to fight another day at the 2026 World Cup. Portugal, wearing their crisp white and lagoon green away kit for the very first time at this tournament, were desperate to shake off a stuttering group stage. Croatia, in a deep royal blue change strip instead of their famous red and white checkers, arrived carrying the weight of a golden generation, searching for one last impossible run. This was the round of 32. Lose, and you go home. Portugal arrived here, having finished second in Group K, a run that included a draw with a spirited DR Congo, a routine win over Uzbekistan, and a goalless stalemate with Colombia that cost them top spot. Croatia's path had been rockier still, opening the tournament with a chastening 4-2 defeat to England before grinding out a nervy 1-0 win over Panama and then finding their best form to beat Ghana and sneak through in second place. Neither side arrived in Toronto with much swagger, but both believed they still had one big performance left in them. Portugal's squad also carried something heavier than tactics into this game, a symbolic +1 place kept open in memory of Diogo Jota, the forward who had died the previous July, with tribute wristbands worn by every outfield player as a quiet reminder of what the shirt means beyond the result on the pitch. At the heart of it all stood two men whose careers had crossed paths for almost 2 decades. Cristiano Ronaldo, 41 years old, chasing the one World Cup knockout goal that had somehow eluded him across 5 previous tournaments. Luka Modric, 39, still pulling the strings for Croatia as if the calendar meant nothing to him. Both wore the tournament's rare legacy patch, reserved for players competing in a 5th World Cup or more. Neither man knew it yet, but by the final whistle, only one of them would still be dreaming of the trophy neither has ever lifted. Roberto Martinez set his Portugal up in a 4-2-3-1, trusting João Neves and Vitinha to control the tempo in midfield, while Pedro Neto and Rafael Leao provided width either side of Bruno Fernandes, with Ronaldo leading the line. Zlatko Dalic countered with his own 4-2-3-1, anchored by the double pivot of Modric and Mateo Kovacic, with Nikola Vlasic, Petar Sutic and Martin Baturina supporting lone striker Ante Budimir. It was a chess match between two sides who valued control, and for the opening exchanges, Portugal looked like the team more willing to make the first move. Croatia's plan was clear from the first whistle: sit compact, let Modric and Kovacic dictate the pace rather than the press, and trust that Perisic and Budimir could hurt Portugal in transition once the game opened up. It was a template Dalic had used for 2 decades with this golden generation, and there was no reason to abandon it now, simply because half the squad were playing in what many assumed would be their final World Cup together. The early signs were ominous for Croatia. Inside the first few minutes, Nuno Mendes drove forward down the left and found Rafael Leao in space, and his pullback forced Bruno Fernandes into 2 attempts that a stubborn Croatian defence somehow smothered. Moments later, it was Pedro Neto's turn, cutting in from the right with a delicate touch that curled across agonisingly wide of Dominic Livakovic's near post. Portugal were dictating the rhythm, patient in possession, probing for the gap that so often opens up against a deep block once the runners start to overlap. But football has a habit of punishing the side that fails to finish its chances, and Croatia slowly began to find their footing. As the half wore on, Fernandes again worked the ball into the box, only for his low effort to be blocked and turned behind for a corner. And right before the break, Neto's cross to the back post was half cleared by Josip Stanisic, only for Leao to pounce and drag a rising volley just over the crossbar. Half-time arrived goalless, but the story of the half belonged to Portugal's control and Croatia's discipline. 2 very different approaches locked in a stalemate. Portugal had enjoyed the better of the territory and the chances, yet there was a nagging sense that without a killer final ball, all that possession would count for nothing. Croatia, for their part, had ridden their luck at times, but were exactly where Dalic wanted them to be, goalless, patient, and one moment of transition away from changing the entire complexion of the tie. The second half exploded into life within minutes. Croatia broke forward through Mateo Kovacic, who forced a sharp reflex save out of Diogo Costa, a warning that the Vatreni were far from finished. Then, in the 53rd minute, disaster struck for Portugal. Stanisic surged into space down the right and swung across toward the penalty area. Ruben Dias got a touch on it, but succeeded only in diverting the ball to the opposite side of the box, directly into the path of Ivan Perisic, left completely unmarked. The veteran winger did not need a second invitation, drilling a low, left-footed finish, first time, into the far corner. Croatia led 1-0, and BMO Field's blue-clad supporters erupted, sensing history in the making for a golden generation that refused to fade quietly. It was a painfully avoidable goal from Portugal's perspective, a routine clearance that instead played the danger man onside and in space, the exact kind of defensive lapse that a compact, counter-attacking side like Croatia is built to exploit and punish without mercy. Portugal responded almost immediately. Rafael Leao cut inside from the left and lashed a swerving effort that crashed against the crossbar, the whole stadium rising and falling in the same 3 seconds. Then, in the 61st minute, delirium! Pedro Neto slid a perfectly weighted through ball in behind the Croatian defence. Ronaldo controlled it in one touch and buried his finish beyond Kovacic, wheeling away in celebration of what appeared to be his first ever World Cup knockout goal. The flag went up. Ronaldo had timed his run fractionally too early, and after review, the goal was correctly ruled out for offside. It was a gut punch delivered and withdrawn within the same 10 seconds, and you could see the frustration written across Ronaldo's face as he trudged back for the restart. Roberto Martinez did not hesitate. Within 2 minutes of the disallowed goal, he sent on a wave of fresh legs, all at once. Vitinha, the deep-lying playmaker who had controlled Portugal's tempo all night, made way for Bernardo Silva. Then Bruno Fernandes was withdrawn for Nelson Semedo. João Cancelo made room for the specialist finisher, Goncalo Ramos, and Pedro Neto, who had been so lively all match, gave way to Francisco Conceição. 4 changes in the space of a single minute, a bold, almost desperate roll of the dice from Martinez to freshen his attack and change the geometry of the game before it slipped away entirely. The substitutions paid an almost instant dividend. Straight from the resulting passage of play, Portugal won a corner, and as the delivery came in, Nikola Vlasic was adjudged to have dragged down Renato Veiga inside the area. The referee pointed to the spot after a lengthy VAR review confirmed the contact was enough to award the penalty. Cristiano Ronaldo picked up the ball, placed it down with the calm of a man who has taken 1,000 of these before, and sent Livakovic the wrong way in the 68th minute. 1-1. For a player who had gone into the match without a single World Cup knockout goal in his entire career, it was a release valve for 2 decades of pressure. And the away end of BMO Field roared as one. Croatia refused to be knocked out of their stride. Kovacic, arguably the game's most influential midfielder in that period, produced 2 more moments to remember. First, he crashed a shot off the post, and from the rebound scramble, Diogo Costa had to fling himself low to deny him again. A phenomenal double save that kept the scoreline level. Zlatko Dalic reshaped his side too, bringing on Mario Pasalic for Martin Baturina in the 68th minute to add fresh legs to a midfield that had run itself into the ground, pressing high. Then, in the 81st minute, Roberto Martinez made the substitution that silenced the stadium before it roared again. Cristiano Ronaldo, the talisman, the man who had just ended his own personal knockout goal drought, was withdrawn for Ruben Neves. Audible gasps rippled around BMO Field as Ronaldo trudged off, applauding the travelling support, unaware whether this had been his final act on the World Cup stage. It was a pragmatic, if emotionally loaded, decision, one built on protecting a squad that still had games to play rather than sentiment for a legend. With the match delicately balanced at 1 apiece, both sides traded half chances as fatigue set into tired legs. Croatia introduced Igor Matanovic at half-time for Ante Budimir, and his direct running had troubled Portugal's backline throughout the second half, though clear-cut opportunities remained scarce for both sides deep into the final quarter of an hour. Portugal's fresh legs down the flanks began to stretch the game again. Nelson Semedo breaking clear on the counter and feeding Francisco Conceição, whose driven effort curled just wide of the far post, a warning sign of things to come. Extra time deep into stoppage seemed destined to decide this one, and it very nearly did. But not before one final twist. As the 10 added minutes ticked down, Portugal won a corner on the right, delivered by Nuno Mendes. The ball broke loose, ping-ponging around a crowded box, and substitute Rafael Leao, still on the pitch and full of running, showed the composure to pick out a cross rather than force a shot. His ball found Goncalo Ramos, the substitute forward introduced only minutes earlier, and the striker rose to power a header beyond Livakovic in the 90th plus 4th minute. Portugal led for the first time all night, 2-1, and BMO Field detonated into scenes of pure relief and joy, players sprinting to the corner flag in celebration, while the Croatian bench slumped in collective disbelief. Croatia were not finished chasing an equaliser, throwing bodies forward in a frantic final flurry. Ivan Perisic picked up a yellow card for a late crunching challenge as frustration boiled over, the physical toll of the occasion laid bare in stoppage time. Then, deep into the 13th minute of injury time, Croatia thought they had done it. A scrambled, chaotic passage of play inside the Portuguese box ended with the ball crossing the line, and the blue-shirted end of the stadium erupted in premature celebration. But the connected ball technology and the semi-automated offside system told a different story. Igor Matanovic had strayed fractionally offside in the build-up moments earlier, and after review, the goal was correctly chalked off. It was the cruelest possible ending for a Croatian side that had matched and at times bettered their illustrious opponents for long stretches of the match. When the final whistle sounded, Portugal had survived, 2-1, sealing a place in the round of 16 against fellow European rivals Spain. For Cristiano Ronaldo, it was a night of redemption, his first World Cup knockout goal arriving from the penalty spot in what may be his final tournament appearance. For Luka Modric and Croatia, it was an agonizingly narrow exit, a golden generation's fairy tale run brought to an end by fractions of an inch, and a video review. Two icons, two legacy patches, sharing a pitch for what might be the only time in their storied careers. And in the end, it was Goncalo Ramos, the substitute, and the video assistant referee who decided which of them would keep dreaming just a little longer. The numbers told their own story of a match that swung on fine margins. Both goalkeepers were called into repeated, high-quality action. Both defences were stretched to breaking point in transition. And both benches gambled with bold, attacking substitutions that ultimately shaped the outcome as much as anything that happened in open play. For Portugal, the road now leads to a blockbuster round of 16, meeting with Iberian rivals Spain, a tie that will demand far more control than they showed for large parts of this one if Ronaldo's fairy tale is to continue. For Croatia, there is only reflection on a campaign that promised little after the opening defeat to England, delivered a stirring recovery through the group stage, and finally fell in the cruelest possible fashion by the width of a boot and the word of a video review. Whether this was truly the last dance for Modric and this remarkable generation of Croatian footballers, only time will tell. But few teams left this World Cup with more pride intact than the Vetreni, who walked off BMO Field that night.